My interview of Dr. Bruss is real video I filmed of myself and the interviewee in the creation of this program. Other video shots of me I created from a script I wrote using a generative artificial intelligence AI platform and my own avatar of me. We hope you enjoy reality and AI merging in this video. Stressed out? Frazzled? Burned out? Are you, or other lawyers you know, out of order? We will soon see the case of the three judges: alcohol, a strip club, White Castle burgers, and yes, wait for it, and guns. So you will see some out-of-order stuff in the real world. You may think you are not stressed or burned out, but find you are actually stressed out to the point of needing proper help. This wellness and mental health legal education program for lawyers looks at an interview I conducted with a renowned PhD clinical psychologist, department chair and professor, Dr. Gary Bruss, to actually ask and answer these key questions. Do we need help? How do we know when we need help? What does help look like? And does professional help actually work? With moving and empowering stories, we unpackage this critical area for us as lawyers so that we may perform our best. With that quick intro, let me say hello and welcome. My name is Peter Afrasiabi. I am an intellectual property litigator at the law firm of One LLP with offices in Newport Beach and Los Angeles, California. My practice focuses on copyright, right of publicity, trademark, and related privacy torts. I also teach as an adjunct at the University of California Irvine School of Law, where I teach a Ninth Circuit Appeals litigation clinic with my students, as well as at times an advocacy and persuasion course. I have taught advocacy at the National Institute of Trial Advocacy and taught advocacy to new barristers at Oxford University in England. But keep in mind, all of the views expressed in this video are mine and mine alone, and are not the views of my law firm, the university, or any other institution or entity I work with. So let's delve into these issues and make sure that we are not out of order. And we will start with a fantastic short clip from a fictional movie, but one that highlights the impact of stress and burnout on lawyers. This takes us to Al Pacino in the movie called And Justice for All. Al Pacino here is a defense lawyer representing a judge accused of rape, and he is doing his Hollywood-inspired opening argument that quickly goes off the rails.
And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No. Because I'm going to get him. My client, the Honorable Henry T. Fleming, should go right to fucking jail. The son of a bitch is guilty. That man is guilty. That man there, that man is a slime. He is a slime. If he's allowed to go free, then something really wrong is going on.
Mr. Kirkland, you are out of order.
You're out of order. You're out of order. The whole trial is out of order. They're out of order. That man, that sick, crazy, depraved man, raped and beat that woman there, and he'd like to do it again. He told me so. It's just a show. It's a show. Come on. Let's make a deal. Let's make a deal. Hey, Frank, you want to make a deal? I got an insane judge who likes to beat the shit out of women. What do you want to give me, Frank? 3 weeks probation?
Damn it, what I said.
You son of a bitch, you. You're supposed to stand for something. You're supposed to protect people, but instead you fucking murder them. You killed McCullough. You killed him. Hold it. Hold it. I just completed my opening statement.
Well, that was something. None of us, of course, want to end up like that lawyer, breaching their duties to their clients, freaking out in court, and so we are all going to avoid that. Let's then start with the continuing legal education standards that govern this credit issue, as required by the bar. First, stress and burnout. This includes professional burnout and stress among lawyers, including what it is, how it impacts attorneys in and out of the office, how to spot it, and how to address professional burnout. Second, the focus is on awareness so that we can find solutions. For example, stress management programs, which focus on building awareness of stress-related problems in the practice of law. including recognizing signs of stress in oneself or one's colleagues, and instituting preventative measures as an individual. And third, all of this relates to protecting our duty of competence so that our stress and burnout issues do not impact our ability to deliver the best services to our clients within our duty of competence. These three pillars frame where we are going, which allows us to see the interview with Dr. Bruss, explore the really significant data on lawyer stress, burnout, and fatigue, and look at some fascinating real-world examples of judges and substance and wellness options when overloaded. And by the way, if you have not seen that movie, it is a great one to watch on this entire topic, as you will see other lawyers totally broken by the stress of law, as well as the judges who are themselves battling their mental health and stress issues. Let's turn to our agenda today then, so that we can learn about wellness burnout and steps we can take as lawyers to avoid it. Later on, we will look at a case of judges, alcohol, late-night strip clubs, and guns. Yes, you heard that right. It is a case here in America, and it is one that screams out for the issues we are discussing today. With that, here is our agenda. We will look at the duty of competence and wellness standards from the state bar so we can contextualize the issues as they relate to our ethical obligations. We will have a great interview for you with Dr. Gary Bruss, an academic department chair and professor of psychology, and also a clinical therapist, to discuss lawyers, stress therapy options, and methods and the value of therapy in terms of real-world experience. Dr. Bruss is incredibly informative, dynamic, and inspiring in terms of his words for the bar. And this will give us tips for our practice to ensure wellness. We will also see some tests that you can take by listening to the questions I pose, formulated by the California State Bar, and answering them for yourself there while watching this. These tests let you assess substance issues and anxiety and depression issues. Let's look now at the educational standard for the program. The continuing education standard for us is to look at activities for wellness competence that encompasses practical strategies for managing mental health, stress, and overall well-being that are tailored to the legal profession. This includes, but is not limited to, the following topics: barriers to wellness for lawyers and why there's often reluctance to seek help; professional burnout among lawyers, including what it is, how it impacts attorneys in and out of the office, how to spot it, and how to address professional burnout; stress management programs which focus on building awareness of stress-related problems in the practice of law, including through topics on work-life balance; recognizing signs of stress in oneself or one's colleagues; instituting preventative measures as an individual, and developing policies within a law firm or legal department for dealing with stress-impaired attorneys. Is it real, you ask? Are we all fine, and is this just complaining? Turns out there is data on the profound stress impacting competency, and it is very real. Here we have a Law.com mental health survey from 2023 and 2024. This involved 3,000 lawyers who were asked questions about mental health in relation to their practice. 38% of them said they were depressed, which increased from 35% in 2022. 70% of lawyers surveyed said they had anxiety, and 65 to 70% said they had other mental health issues. Over 80 to 90% indicated substance problems, specifically drug and alcohol. And all numbers increased over prior years. Thus, despite trying to address the stigma and offer mental health resources, mental health issues among lawyers remain high and stagnant. That is scary stuff. So let's now start with a quick small part of the interview with Dr. Bruss to contextualize one key issue out of the gate as it relates to lawyer wellness. The question we ask and answer is the benefit of therapy, stigma related to it. Does it work to help wellness and quality of life so that we can, as lawyers, better manage our stress and ethical obligations? So let's now watch this snippet of the interview to stand and deliver right now on the importance of this issue for lawyers, stigma with therapy, and whether therapy works.
Thank you. Let me ask you this. You mentioned the red flags to look for, the tipping point symptomatically, I think was your phrase. And the stigma that lawyers in particular, but many professionals and people obviously may feel about going. Let me ask you this: you must meet lots of patients who come and they talk about, oh, I don't really want to be here. This isn't for me, but I have to come here for some reason. My boss, my wife, whatever the story may be. Have you ever had an experience where these people who don't really want to be in therapy or don't really believe in it ultimately, I'm assuming, in other words, that people ultimately all benefit by this? Or have you had experiences where people walk away not benefiting?
So look, a great question. And I think the answer to that is that it would be arrogant of me to say that nobody walks away feeling like they didn't benefit. I think there's always the risk of that happen. But again, given my aggregated experience, that is not typically what happens. And it's not uncommonly the case that people present and they're doing it because somebody in their family or in their place of work says, we want you to go and begin a series of conversations, taking a look at things in your internal life. The challenge of the psychotherapist is to create a space where somebody feels heard and understood, and to invoke within them a level of confidence that I, as a psychologist, am going to try to understand and listen in this objective, non-judgmental way. And I'm going to try to help you figure out how to resolve the issue. Because here's the thing, even if you don't think you need something, but somebody in your family, in your workplace thinks you need something, there is something going on in your life. And that in and of itself is worth trying to deconstruct and understand. And here's the other part, Peter, that almost invariably happens. Somebody will come in and they'll say, I'm coming in for reason X. And we talk about reason X, and then I listen very carefully and I learn more about the person. But then issue Y and issue Z comes up as well. And then suddenly the conversation morphs into a much larger conversation where there's an intersectionality between all these issues, where I hope to spark a level of curiosity in the person to be invested in trying to deconstruct and understand this, because it's all about quality of life. It's about making your life better, making you feel better, making your relationships better, making your work life better. So is it possible for somebody to come away going, look, I don't want to do this? There's always going to be people who say, look, I don't want to do this, and I was forced into this, and I'm not going to stick it out. But I got to say to you that it's an extremely rare event for me when somebody presents, for them not to find a way to get engaged and to get to a place where they are trusting the process. I want to also say that I view that as a privilege for people to come to my office and to open up and to entrust themselves to me to talk about things that they probably don't talk to a lot of other people, maybe nobody about, is indeed a privilege. And I see it as my primary first goal is to create that place of safety and to say to them, look, this is something that's worth talking about. I think most psychologists, myself included, if somebody presents with, we don't think that there's reason for them to be there, we'll be the first people to say, I don't think this belongs in this space. I think they should resolve this in somewhere else.
So I think that tells us out of the gate that, essentially, therapy is a tried and true method of simply managing stress. It is in a trusted, safe space. And it is so we may perform as lawyers competently and mitigate the risk of tripping ethics lines, also that we do not fall into that scary data set we just looked at. While it's not guaranteed 100%, it is incredibly rare to not benefit by it when seeking to manage burnout. Why does this matter as it relates to our ethical standards? This brings us to our ethical duties that frame this entire inquiry. We will look now at Rule 1.1 from California, which is similar to most state rules, so we use it as an example rule. Here's what it says. A lawyer shall not intentionally, recklessly, with gross negligence, or repeatedly fail to perform legal services with competence. For purposes of this rule, competence in any legal service shall mean to apply the 1, learning and skill, and 2, mental, emotional, and physical ability reasonably necessary for the performance of such service. Further, if a lawyer does not have sufficient learning and skill when the legal services are undertaken, the lawyer nonetheless may provide competent representation by 1, associating with or, where appropriate, professionally consulting another lawyer whom the lawyer reasonably believes to be competent. 2, acquiring sufficient learning and skill before performance is required. Or 3, referring the matter to another lawyer whom the lawyer reasonably believes to be competent. So, the ABA model rules are the same as some other jurisdictions. For example, ABA Rule 1.1 is on competence, and 5.1 touches on supervising younger lawyers, all in the context of making sure ethics lines are not tripped. And New York education program rules also require, to satisfy competence concerns, a focus on wellness, burnout, stress, and the like, where competency as a lawyer is imbued with these concerns also, not just knowledge of the law. The key question, then, is how to make sure we do not drop below that standard when at the same time we are managing the clients, judges, opposing lawyers, in-house client contacts, money issues, and getting paid. It's a fire hose we are all drinking from. Yet at the same time, we have to make sure we are performing competently, not just with legal knowledge, but doing so with the requisite mental and emotional well-being. This requires us to dive into burnout and how to address it with stress management programs. Here we look specifically at therapy to combat stress. And now let's dive into our interview from the beginning.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about your background?
Peter, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate that. I'm happy to be here and to chat with you. I've actually worked with many lawyers over the years, so it's a pleasure to be able to talk with you today. A little bit about my background is I have a PhD in clinical psychology from Ohio University, and then I did my pre- and postdoctoral training in Philadelphia at the Institute of Pennsylvania Hospital, which was part of the Pennsylvania Hospital Health System and the University of Pennsylvania Hospital Health System. Currently, I am a professor and the department chair of the doctoral program in clinical psychology at the Chicago School in Anaheim, which is an APA, American Psychological Association accredited program. So that would be akin to like being an ABA law school. And then in addition to that, I have a private practice in Irvine.
I would love it if you could share with us a sort of story of inspiration and hope, just right up front for our listeners to gauge mental health, the law, white-collar professionals, and your experiences and story.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. The first thing I want to say that I hope would be inspiring to your audience is that the psychotherapy outcome literature, and that's the body of literature that evaluates the effectiveness of psychological interventions, is compelling in its conclusion that psychotherapy works. So I hope that comes across as I intended to. Psychotherapy is very helpful to people, and maybe I can elucidate that a little bit in a clinical anecdote just to kind of start the conversation. And this is a case actually of a patient I worked with some years ago. So just to be clear, this is all de-identified. So it's, doesn't define any confidentiality parameters that I'm bound by. This is a case of a man in his 50s who was a senior level lawyer in a firm, and had actually done rather well in this firm, married with a couple of kids, and by all impressions was a high functioning person who was doing well both in his occupational life and in his social relational family life, but was feeling the increasing burden of the stress and the pressure, the high demand nature, the deadlines, the intensity of the work, and a little bit of his own perfectionism was baked into that concern. And even though he had a good relationship with his wife, he tended to be more frustrated at home, had anger issues, was seemingly mood dysregulated, felt depressed a lot of the time. And despite his wife's efforts to engage him around those concerns, he was kind of dismissive and isolative and very focused on his work life, and very concerned about making sure that there was essentially his primary focus. And his way of dealing that ultimately was that he decided that he was going to just try to take the edge of it at night with a glass of wine or two. And you can see where this is going. That turned into more than a glass of wine or two, more than every night. And before you know it, he's having some alcohol issues. In addition, his wife is understandably upset with him, withdraws from the relationship more, is less available to him. When he wants to spend time with her, when he wants to initiate intimacy with her, she's kind of like disengaged and says, look, you're not present in other ways, and therefore it's hard for me just to show up when you need me to show up. So it's kind of a classic story that oftentimes unfolds. Long story short is he lands up going to a conference, meets somebody, starts having an affair, happens to be somebody that is located reasonably close to him, and he continues this affair because, you know, somebody is now attending to him and validating him and soothing him. His wife starts to get suspicious. She checks his text trail, discovers that he's having the affair. He acknowledges it. And now there's terrible debris and damage. She feels betrayed. His adult children learn about it. They feel betrayed as well. And this is the case of a otherwise decent man who does an indecent thing. And I'm in no way making that statement am I condoning his behavior, but rather just providing an explanation for it. He feels terrible shame, terrible regret, recognizes that he's misstepped horribly, and wants to make it up with his wife and his kids, which of course has left a fair amount of debris. Now, the good news about the story is that over time in psychotherapy, he starts to really deal with these things. What complicated for him as well, Peter, is that he talked a lot about his early experiences with his father, who was a demanding, emotionally unavailable man who he never felt he could really please in any way. And so he talked about this imposter syndrome phenomenon, and that he felt like he always had to, he never measured up, even though by every measure he was measuring up financially in terms of how he was doing in the firm and in terms of how his community of people. So, you know, he did well over time, and he and his wife were able to reconcile, albeit that, you know, there's damage done. It's a scarring impact. So I know what his core value system was. He was indeed a decent man who did an indecent thing, but you paid the price for it. Now, the problem with that is that he got, rather than seek out psychotherapy initially because of his concerns about being, you know, seeking out psychotherapeutic interventions, he didn't, and he paid a heavy price for it. So this is kind of a typical presentation that I see oftentimes, that folks are coming in, and my aggregated clinical impression of these presentations is that people come in with anxiety, depression, stress, shame, anger, frustration, tolerance, burnout, I'm having relational problems, etc. And they sometimes know why it's happening. They sometimes don't know why it's happening. And what complicates this for many is the kind of cultural context in which we live, which is that people still feel a sense of shame and stigma about going to seek psychotherapy. They rather deny it, minimize it, attempt to sweep it under the rug. And it's kind of rooted in our culture. It's kind of a societal unfairness in this sense. So if you look gaunt and malnourished, people around you, your family, friends, or colleagues would be very, very concerned about how you're doing and would inquire if you're okay and suggest that you see a doctor, and you probably would. However, if you felt the psychological equivalence internally, where you felt unwell or something's wrong or you're anxious or you're stressed, it may not get recognized, and people may not say anything, and it would be your own private battle. So every one of us has kind of a frustration tolerance limit. So for example, sorry, did you want to ask a question?
Before we get back to the video interview to look at stigma and stressors that drive these wellness issues, after that positive story of how therapy can indeed help us as lawyers, let's look at some more data again on legal profession burnout rates. This is from a California study in 2022 from the California Lawyers Association on male and female burnout rates. It was a study of 2,863 lawyers on gender-specific risks, and there was a randomized recruitment of people. Here are the findings and results. The prevalence and severity of depression, anxiety, stress, and risky hazardous drinking were significantly higher among women lawyers. 24.2% of women were considering leaving due to burnout. 17.4% of men were considering leaving due to burnout. That's a large number of us. Here's another study. This from the California Lawyers Association analysis of 2024. Lawyers contemplate suicide 2 to 3 times the general population. We should pause on that data for a moment, as it is profound and something we as a bar must address and fix. And a California and DC study found that 66% said that their time in the legal profession was detrimental to their mental health, and 46% said they were considering leaving the profession due to stress or burnout. And a nationwide study of 13,000 lawyers indicated that 28% experienced depression, 19% reported anxiety, 21% had alcohol use problems, and 11% had problems with drug use. And just so you know, I am not cherry-picking California data or picking on California lawyers. Here is a study from Missouri. Legal professionals at greater risk for compassion fatigue are those who work in criminal, family, or juvenile law, those with caseloads involving lots of human-induced trauma, those with high percentage of exposure to graphic evidence day in and day out, those who work grim dockets over a long period of time, those who work alone, those with higher caseloads, and those with limited support. Personality factors that increase susceptibility include a high need for control, over-dedication, perfectionism, and workaholic tendencies. Others at greater risk are idealists, those with unrealistic expectations or low coping abilities. Very empathic people who pour high levels of emotional energy into their work can become overwhelmed over time. This helps explain what Dr. Bruss was discussing, and I think this data brings us now back to advice for lawyers and the issue of stigma to get in and talk to someone so we do not end up in that scary data set.
Fantastic point, because your story of the decent person who otherwise did an indecent thing, what it's driving at, it sounds to me like, is that if he had come in earlier and caught it, he may have avoided the waterfall effect that befell, him and his family and further problems down the road. And so
Yeah.
I wonder if that's true, and if it gets then at this idea of, what are the drivers then that are pushing lawyers, white-collar professionals like lawyers, into these mental health issues that then start damaging our ability to practice our profession.
Yeah, absolutely. And your speculation about that is exactly correct. It's if he did come to therapy eventually, but it was kind of after the fact. We had to deconstruct what was going on, which was that there were an array of current stresses in his life, as well as historic forces that made him feel insecure and second-guessed himself, where he harbored a reservoir of self-doubt that led to this kind of imposter syndrome effect, which was really a feeling and not a fact about him. So he conflated the feeling and the fact because he hadn't truly done the internal psychological work to deconstruct the origins of why he felt like he was an imposter. So yes, absolutely, this could have been avoided. And that is why it's so essential, as I think you're inferring, that the early identification is really essential so that you get in ahead of the fact rather than acting out and it coming out sideways. And then you're having to manage all the debris. And that debris can sometimes kind of have a long arc of a scarring effect. People get better, but once betrayal occurs, it can be quite difficult to come back from it. So I think the thing, to your question about what affects white, collar professionals or lawyers, is, look, heavy workloads, performance pressure, long hours, tight deadlines. Depending on the workplace culture, is it a toxic workplace culture or not? There can be high levels of perfectionism that are coupled with self-doubt, as I was just suggesting in this clinical anecdote. I know this is very cliched to say, we hear it all the time in life, but poor work-life balance is a real concern. That ability to find ways to step back and to self-regulate. And whether it's through exercise or time spent with family or meditation or yoga, you know, going to concerts, whatever helps you kind of reset in a sense. People that work hard oftentimes have a sedentary lifestyle. They're sitting all the time. They're not getting out and moving their bodies, which is we know kind of helps with stress. And so, as I said earlier, hey, you know what? I can do the quick fix at the end of the day, drink some alcohol, maybe smoke some weed, take some other drugs, and you can see how that's kind of that's a kind of a going down a rabbit hole. The stress of work life will interfere with married life and family life, and so the kinds of good times you should share with your family gets compromised. If there's a lack of social support, it's not uncommon for people who work in high stress environments like lawyers do to put in a tremendous amount of effort and sometimes feel like they're not getting the reward. So there's that stress, effort reward imbalance. And then, of course, as I keep referring to, this kind of culturally mediated problem that we have is that the stigma around saying, hey, I'm not feeling so well. You know, lawyers live in a world of highly educated colleagues, high stress. You guys are, there's lots of adversarial stuff going on. You take on the tough actors in life, and so you have to project a certain degree of toughness. And the notion that you might feel, oh my gosh, I don't feel well inside emotionally, and my medical doctor is saying there's no medical explanation for it, it's almost like antithetical to one's sense of I'm a tough guy or a tough person, and I'm feeling not so well inside, which might get construed as a marker of weakness, which it really isn't. It just means that you know you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of duress that you're under.
What would be your advice for this sort of, for us as lawyers? We live in this world, like you said, it's a fishbowl. We're fighting with judges and other lawyers and corporations all day long. And you're right about the stigma point. How do we overcome this concern about stigma in order to end up in front of you for seeking help when we have this level of stress and problem?
Yeah, absolutely, and a very good question, and obviously a challenge culturally for a long time. I do want to say that there's been significant advancements in that direction, especially in the United States as compared to other parts of the world. So that's the good part of the story. But the not so good part of the story is that there's still the residue of this stigma. So what I'd like to, in respond to that, I'd like to speak a little bit about something called the biopsychosocial model. We are biopsychosocial creatures. We're not just biological creatures. And it's well accepted in the medical and psychological sciences that we are biopsychosocially organized. It's just the nature of the human condition. So if you feel unwell physically, most people will just say, I'm going to go see a medical doctor because I have a biological problem. But if we accept the underlying assumption, which is well, again, accepted by the scientific communities in medicine and in the psychological sciences, that we are biopsychosocially organized, then you have to give equal emphasis to each three of those elements, that I'm biologically organized, I have an internal psychological life, and I live in a social environmental context. And there is like an intersectionality between those three all the time. So we hear about stress and health and all those things. So to ignore or deny that is to negate the human condition. And it's a kind of a hard thing to wrap one's head around, but that's just the nature of the beast, right? So if I have a sore knee, why is it okay for me to go to the doctor to have my knee looked at? But if I have a sore emotions, it's not okay.
No,
Yet I'm a biopsychosocial creature. It doesn't make any sense. And Peter, after all these years, it's of doing this now, 3 decades or so of doing this, I still marvel at the fact that people get stuck in this way, and I do understand it. I understand it because it's like, well, I'm supposed to pull up my socks and just figure this out, right? I'm tough. And I'm a lawyer and I live in a world of adversarial interfaces, and all these other people seem to be doing fine. So you think, until you have a deeper private conversation with them. Now, you know, mental health professionals are trained to listen and understand and evaluate and provide guidance and to help help people cope, cope with overcoming these kinds of emotional difficulties. It's non-judgmental, it's objective, it's a safe place to air concerns. I wish you could be a fly on the wall of my office for just 1 week to see the array of people that I see: lawyers, doctors, CEOs, financial managers, academicians, people that you would meet at a dinner party and would be highly engaged with, and you would think they're intelligent and charming and interesting, and you'd want to see them again. And yet they're in my office talking about their internal concerns because they've overcome this concern, the hurdle around stigma, and are not interested in the advancement of their internal life and understand that they are biopsychosocial creatures.
The biopsychosocial model makes eminent logical sense as a way to cognize our health as lawyers. And so let us now pause on the interview for a moment to look at the case that I know you were all waiting for. That is, the case of the judges, alcohol, strip clubs, guns, and White Castle burgers. It's really too much to be true, but it is true. And it allows us to better see the value in the biopsychosocial model that Dr. Bruss was talking about. This is the case of Judges Adams, Jacobs, and Bell from the Indiana Supreme Court in 2019. And you can read the opinion there if you think I am making any of this up. So here are the facts. 3 judges were at a judicial conference event, 2 men and 1 female judge. They checked into the hotel and spent the evening socializing with other judicial officers and drinking alcoholic beverages. And they kept drinking. They met at a bar at 12:30 and, again, kept drinking. Then, at 3 a.m., they decided they wanted to go to a strip club. But, it turned out, the strip club was closed. So what did they do? I guess they had the munchies, so they went to White Castle for some burgers and fries. Yes, you ask. I promised you guns in this story, and we are getting there. So they are at White Castle, and 1 went in and 2 waited outside. Now enter some more people to our story. Alfredo Vazquez and Brandon Kaiser drove past the group and shouted something out the window. Judge Bell extended her middle finger to Vazquez and Kaiser, who pulled into the White Castle parking lot and exited the vehicle. Judge Bell, who was intoxicated, has no memory of the incident, but conceded that the security camera video shows her making this gesture. A heated verbal altercation ensued, with all participants yelling, using profanity, and making dismissive, mocking, or insolent gestures toward the other group. At no time did the judges move to another location in the parking lot to avoid a confrontation or de-escalate the conflict. So, they are in this verbal fight, but it now escalates to a physical fight where our judges pin one of the third parties on the ground. Yes, I swear to you, this is all true. So Judge Jacobs had Kaiser contained on the ground. With his fist raised back, Judge Jacobs said, Okay, we're done, or this is over. Tell me this is over, or words to that effect. At another point during the confrontation, Judge Adams kicked Kaiser in the back. And so, the gun appears in our story. Third-party Kaiser pulled out a gun and literally shot Judge Adams once, and shot Judge Jacobs twice. Judge Adams and Judge Jacobs were transported to local hospitals for treatment of their serious injuries. Judge Adams, who sustained a single gunshot wound to the abdomen, had 2 emergency surgeries, including a colon resectioning. Judge Jacobs, who sustained 2 gunshot wounds to the chest, also had 2 emergency surgeries and was hospitalized for 14 days. Upon admission to the hospital, Judge Adams's blood alcohol level was 0.213, or approximately 0.157 using whole blood, and Judge Jacobs' serum blood alcohol level was 0.177, or approximately 0.13 using whole blood. Judge Bell's blood alcohol level was not tested, but she was intoxicated enough that she lacks any memory of the incident. Judge Bell remained on the scene to speak to the police and was later taken to the police station to give a recorded statement. In her statements to the police, Judge Bell asserted that she does not remember what she said to Vazquez or Kaiser, or what started the physical altercations. However, while on the scene, the media videotaped Judge Bell telling police detectives in an excited state, "I feel like this is all my fault," or words to that effect. Judge Bell, however, later did not remember making the statement. After being informed during her recorded statement that police detectives had video of the incident, Judge Bell remarked that, "I'm afraid that I said something to them first. I don't know. We're all very good friends, and they're very protective of me. And I don't know, and I'm afraid that I said something to those two strange men at first. And then they said something back to me. And then I said something, and then Judge Adams and Judge Jacobs went to defend me. I'm not denying that I said something or egged it on. Because I drink, I fully acknowledge that I drink and get mouthy and I'm fiery and I'm feisty, but if I would have ever thought for a second that they were going to fight or that that guy had a gun on him, I would never. So there you have it. Truth is stranger than fiction, and this story matches blow for blow the Al Pacino clip we watched in the beginning, in my opinion. Here is what happened to the judges when put before the Supreme Court for discipline. The court held that the judges have no prior disciplinary history as judges or as lawyers. They accepted responsibility and expressed remorse for their conduct. They have made efforts to address their behavior by contacting the Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program and by seeing counselors. They got 30 to 60-day suspensions. That seemingly low sentence is a topic for our other program on Judges Gone Wild that you can search for and watch. Well, they at least did some wellness programs, it sounds like. So, let's get back to Dr. Bruss now and look at the underlying theory and philosophy of therapy to help manage this stress, so we don't end up like our Indiana judges here. And as we will explore, you can do therapy over video too if you want to stay in your home. So back to our logic, which we all of course love, that posits that physical injuries need physical help and emotional ones need emotional help.
Your answer is fantastic because you're speaking to the right audience when you employed that logic. You used a great syllogism. We have precedent. I like the doctor knee, sore emotion, go to a therapist.
Yeah.
That logic will work for the lawyers listening. Let me ask you this. Maybe you could go to a higher level and just tell us a little bit about, just at a higher level, what's the underlying philosophy or medical theory behind professionals going and seeking out actual psychotherapy, therapy, talking to you, as opposed to just going to get more exercise at the gym, go do yoga, try meditation, and try to solve problems on our own?
Yeah, so well, let me say that I think all those things are very good things to do, and so to the extent that we attempt to manage the stress in our life, many people are very effective at being able to do that. But I think when things, and even, by the way, even if you have a strong social support system and a spouse or family members or confidants, best friends, family members that you can speak to, I think what you have to be mindful of is when there's that tipping point. And the tipping point is what's going on with you symptomatically, so that you don't deal with the kinds of situation that this lawyer that I mentioned in this clinical anecdote at the start of our meeting, our session, kind of gets downstream and lands up acting out on their feelings rather than being able to reflect and do it ahead of time. But you've got to watch for the warning signs and warning signals. And the common cold of psychological functioning when we present to doctors for the common cold is typically anxiety and depression. So if you feel a sense of like, I know what my baseline is, I know my regulatory zone emotionally. If I know what that is and I'm stepping out of that, either I feel too good or not good at all, then I've got to say, well, I can tolerate that transiently, but longitudinally, that's not making sense. There's a certain kind of lack of homeostasis or a lack of balance, if you will, in terms of my emotional regulation. So if you're feeling depressed, anxious, you're not sleeping well, you're having suicidal ideas, you are struggling, as I said earlier, with imposter syndrome, issues of perfectionism, chronic stress, burnout, those are red flags. And the way that psychologists deal with this is just in the identification of that, to say that's outside the realm of what we consider normal emotional regulation to look like. This is now looking a little bit different. So it rises to the level of something that's more clinically concerning. And the risk of your not taking care of that is that it may spontaneously resolve, but the risk of that not happening is that there are going to be significant longitudinal impacts, both in terms of your work, your occupational life, as well as your social life. And again, that clinical anecdote I shared at the beginning of the session really speaks very directly to that. So in the psychotherapeutic space, you treat every person. It's highly individualized, Peter. So everybody comes in with unique and idiosyncratic concerns, and so psychologists are well trained to do baseline evaluations of people's baselines. Like, what are you at when you're at your highest level functioning, and what is the departure been from your highest level functioning? And then what you do is you try to tailor a psychotherapeutic approach based on the unique and idiosyncratic nature of that person's presentation. And there are a variety of approaches that cut across different psychotherapeutic orientations, from cognitive behavior therapy to acceptance and commitment therapy to deeper dive psychodynamic. I'm going to uncover historic issues that are plaguing you and are somehow invading your current psychological space, where you're conflating fact and feeling, and it's getting in the way of your being able to see more clearly what in fact is really going on, so that you can make different kind of decisions. So there are an array of psychotherapeutic approaches that psychologists can utilize depending on who presents and what they present with. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of the kind of 30,000-foot optic into
this interview here for our education program over Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Could you maybe talk to us a little bit about therapy in person versus doing it online, the pros, the cons, if you take patients online or if you only take patients in person, and sort of what the literature and theory is behind online in this new world we're in?
Yeah, it's such a relevant question, especially in a post-COVID world, right? So had you asked me this question pre-COVID, I would have said to you, no, Peter, you got to come into the office. It's pretty much the only way to do it. And I think that would have been the answer of most people in the mental health professional world. But since COVID, things have shifted. And what COVID did is it led to the investigation of this very, very question empirically. And guess what? There is now a recently published meta-analytic study that finds that therapy in the office and therapy, say, on Zoom or on Teams, is equally effective. So that's what the science says. It's hard to argue with that, right? So during COVID, we were all forced into that place, and I moved from the in-office to having my patients online. And, I think it went just as well. Now, if you ask me what my preference is, there's something very appealing about having somebody come into the office. It's kind of much more immediate, and you can see all the body cues in a different way, and the nonverbals get felt in a different way as part of the interpersonal engagement between the therapist and the patient. But there is a convenience to online that should not be dismissed. People have busy lives. They may think, well, I got to travel, half an hour to my therapist, and then I've got to kind of leave 15 minutes before just to, get organized. And so there's a lot of extra time. And it's like, hey, I can be in the office. I have a quiet space. It's private. I can pop on, have my hour, and then I can move right into the next thing. And so I think that's worth something, right? And so I do both. I think both are effective. The research says both are effective. And so I think we're living in a world right now where that's going to be the way it is. And it's frankly going to be the future. I think it's going to be folks are doing both. Most of my colleagues are doing both. Some of my colleagues are doing online only, as a matter of fact. So I think the answer is yes, I do that. And I think both can be done.
So let's stop now and get a list of distilled tips and tricks that we can take from this program to better make sure we meet wellness standards to comply with our duty of competence. First, given the data we saw, we listened to Dr. Bruss discuss stigma and how to address it. It boils down to this: just do it when needed. Go to therapy and talk, and as he said, it is incredibly rare that it does not improve mental wellness. Second, it can be done on Zoom or video, so that makes it easier to do and strip away stigma we may feel about going into an office. If we must get our toes wet, this is a good way to start entering the proverbial pool. Third, keep in mind the very logical structure of the biopsychosocial nature of us as people that the doctor spoke about. It is actually a pretty narrow logical syllogism. We have a sore knee, we go to the doctor. We have stress and mental heat distress managing. Then, therefore, we should go to a doctor to talk and work through it. Here, on this slide, we will address some other resources or avenues to take to start your journey into being the best state of wellness possible. There are links here for you to dive in deeper, but I want to share each of them a bit with you. First, the Health and Wellness Resources page of the California Lawyers Association. Here, the Health and Wellness Committee provides resources and content that support attorney and law student wellness, including general health, mental health, and problematic substance use. They have some free webinars and videos on mindfulness, managing change, managing stress, beating disease, and other issues that sit beneath stress. They have annual wellness walking challenges also. Second, the American Bar Association. Here, you can find written resources on resiliency, emotional intelligence, plans for time management, juggling work and life, and improving mental health through movement and exercise. For example, there are articles on resiliency and how to build more resilience within our practices, or on perfectionism, which concerns drive higher levels of anxiety and burnout, less healthy coping strategies, and a rigid all-or-nothing mindset. Finally, it looks at how to address this, which also drives, then, stress and burnout. Third, the State Bar of California Lawyer Assistance Program. Here, the actual State Bar has materials that are available to all, including articles, contact lists for help, and online support groups. Also, the State Bar resources start with an approach from simple assessment tests you can take privately to gauge anxiety and depression, so you can then see objective criteria about triggering the need to then seek help. Let's take a look real quick at the questions. Seeing stuff in black and white like this can help us cognize whether we do have to take a harder look in the mirror. We have a series of alcohol and drug questions, and then some anxiety and depression ones. First, get out your pen and paper and number the lines on the paper 1 through 20. Okay, here are 20 questions to listen to and answer yes or no to yourself. The State Bar offers this guidance. If you answered yes to any one of these questions I'm about to read, there is a definite warning that you have a problem with alcohol, drugs. If you answered yes to any 2 of these questions, the chances are that you have a problem with alcohol, drugs. If you answered yes to 3 or more of these questions, you definitely have a problem with alcohol, drugs. So keep score on yourself. Here are the questions. 1. Do you lose time from work due to drinking or using? 2. Is drinking or using making your home life unhappy? 3. Do you drink or use because you are shy with other people? 4. Is drinking or using affecting your reputation? 5. Have you ever felt remorse after drinking or using? 6. Have you had financial difficulties as a result of drinking or using? 7. Do you turn to inferior companions and environments when drinking or using? 8. Does your drinking or using make you careless of your family's welfare? 9. Has your ambition decreased since drinking or using? 10. Do you crave a drink or drug at a definite time or day? 11. Do you want a drink or a drug the next morning? 12. Does drinking or using cause you to have difficulty sleeping? 13. Has your efficiency decreased since drinking or using? 14. Is drinking or using jeopardizing your job or business? 15. Do you drink or use to escape worries or trouble? 16. Do you drink or use alone? 17. Have you ever had a loss of memory as a result of drinking or using? 18. Has your physician ever treated you for drinking or using? 19. Do you drink used to build up self-confidence? 20. Have you ever been to a hospital or institution such as jail because of drinking or using? Okay, I hope you did the test and now you have some insight into yourself. Let's now move to the next test. This is the anxiety test to gauge our anxiety levels. Here are 5 questions to listen to and answer yes or no to yourself. The State Bar offers this guidance, and the State Bar indicates that if you are experiencing any of the following, you can consult the Lawyer Assistance Program for confidential help. So keep score on yourself. Here are the questions. First, have you had at least a 6-month period in which you experienced constant, exaggerated, worrisome thoughts and tension about everyday routine life events and activities? Second, have you been trapped in a distressful and time-consuming pattern of unwanted thoughts or compulsive behaviors? Third, have you experienced or witnessed a traumatic event such as a criminal assault, child abuse, natural or human-caused disasters, after which you have had persistent nightmares, flashbacks, feelings of depression or irritability? Fourth, have you become distractible or easily startled? And fifth, have you experienced repeated episodes of intense fear that strike often and without warning? Physical symptoms can include chest pain, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, dizziness, or abdominal distress. So keep score and see for yourself if you may want to talk to a therapist like Dr. Bruss. Finally, our depression test. Here, we now have the 10 depression test questions to listen to and answer yes or no to yourself. The State Bar offers this guidance, and the State Bar indicates that if you are experiencing any of the following, you can consult the Lawyer Assistance Program for confidential help. And if you answer yes to even a few of these questions, then you may suffer from depression. This is not a substitute for professional guidance, and you can and should consult a professional like our doctor here. So keep score on yourself. First, are you feeling sad, empty, and/or irritable? Second, are you feeling a loss of interest or pleasure in activities or work you once enjoyed? Third, are you experiencing changes in weight and/or appetite? Fourth, are you having increased difficulty sleeping or sleeping more than usual? Fifth, are you experiencing increased restlessness? Sixth, are you experiencing a decrease in level of activity noticeable to others? Seventh, are you feeling more fatigued or less energetic? Eighth, are you having difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions? Ninth, are you feeling overwhelming guilt, hopelessness, or worthlessness? Finally, are you thinking of suicide or death? So those tests are available at that link too, with more resources if you want to dive deeper. Back to our main slide, here is the fourth resource. We have here the Lawyers Depression Project. This is a confidential, peer-to-peer support organization for legal professionals and law students struggling with mental health challenges like depression. It offers free online support meetings and an anonymous online forum, providing a safe space for members to share their experiences and coping strategies. It is a grassroots effort to create a community and reduce stigma within the legal profession. I must say, if one thing stands out to me from the interview with Dr. Bruss, it is the importance of getting over the personal stigma hurdle so change can occur. And then this brings us to the end. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Dr. Bruss. I personally thought he was fantastic. So let's recap what we explored today, so you can keep in mind the high-level takeaways. We looked at the duty of competence and wellness standards that govern us. And it is worth repeating again, as it is a binding standard in our ethics code. A lawyer shall not intentionally, recklessly, with gross negligence, or repeatedly fail to perform legal services with competence. And competence in any legal service requires the mental, emotional, and physical ability reasonably necessary for the performance of such legal services. So we looked then at the drivers in our profession of stress, drivers that pressure our ability to perform at this standard. And the data was certainly concerning. Recall, in one study of 3,000 lawyers, 38% said they were depressed, which had increased from 35% in earlier years. And 70% of lawyers surveyed said they had anxiety, and 65 to 70% said they had other mental health issues. And over 80 to 90% indicated substance problems. In a California study of almost 3,000 lawyers, 24.2% of women were considering leaving due to burnout, and 17.4% of men were considering leaving due to burnout. And a California lawyer study found lawyers contemplate suicide 2 to 3 times the general population. These burnout and wellness issues then are real from the data, and so we have to address them so that we do not trip our ethics rules. This brought us to a fascinating interview with a great clinical psychologist and professor, Dr. Bruss, who kindly did this interview for us. There are several takeaways from that interview I think that matter to us as we address wellness. First, the biopsychosocial model was logical and compelling, and militates in favor of thinking about our emotional and mental wellness as we do about physical illness. Dr. Bruss gave an inspiring story of a person who got help despite being in a dark hole, a story of compassion, and how decent people can find themselves in a bad place, but that does not mean they are fundamentally bad. We learned that people, at root, do benefit by addressing these issues in therapy, and we heard Dr. Bruss address the stigma hurdle and how we get over it. Aside from data requiring us to take seriously Dr. Bruss's words, we looked at the case of the 3 judges at White Castle. It's truly remarkable, but stands as a good example of how we can go out of order when too much alcohol is involved and tempers flare. And so it teaches the importance of looking in, taking stock, and being open to help if we need it. And to do that, we looked at 3 really useful tests we can take to assess the need to get wellness treatment so that we may perform at the highest level possible. The tests covered substance use, anxiety, and depression, were totally private and for your own sense only, and allowed you to assess yourself at least against that benchmark put out by the California State Bar. My parting words are that I think let's all work really hard to not end up like Al Pacino in that opening clip, a lawyer totally out of order going off the rails. We can stay in order, not out of order, and I hope this program gave you some useful tips to manage the issues of your practice and resources to explore if help is needed, down to video therapy services as Dr. Bruss discussed. Dr. Bruss was impressive, and I have to say interviewing him made me feel better, so something worked at least a bit. Thank you for watching this program, for focusing on efforts to be the best professional you can be, and thank you for watching our other programs, including our Curious Lawyer series of programs. And as always, if you have questions, please email me anytime. Thank you.